Hello, hello. Welcome back to Loki's Librarian and our weekly books and booze review. I am your librarian, Katrina. If you are new here, welcome. This is where I am reading through, where I review a book a week and then I mix up a cocktail in the process, although this week I'm not doing a cocktail and I'll come right back to that one. This month I've been taking a look at some of Hollywood's greats, and since next week is the last Sunday and thus a President's book, this week's book is All About Me, My Remarkable Life in Show Business by Mel Brooks. Now, as I just said, normally I do mix up a cocktail, but quite early on, Brooks talks about his favorite drink as a kid at a local pharmacy, which was called a cream egg. There are no eggs in it. There's no cream in it. No one knows why it's called a cream egg, but it is. And I found a recipe for it. Probably won't be quite the same. The one Brooks describes was made with a soda fountain squirter that mixes it up as it goes, and I don't have one of those. I think they're like $99, and I just wasn't going to buy a $99 piece of equipment for a single drink that I may or may not ever make again. But the one I found I think will work. It is a quarter cup of whole milk, 3/4 cups of seltzer, and 2 tablespoons of Fox's You Bet chocolate syrup. And as Brooks says, if it's not You Bet chocolate syrup, it's not a cream egg. So let's do this. Mel Brooks was born Melvin Kaminsky on June 28, 1926 in Brooklyn, New York. And he adopted his stage name Mel Brooks when he was 14 by shortening his first name and then using his mother's maiden name Brookman. Unfortunately, Brookman wouldn't fit on the drum set he was trying to paint with the name, so he went with Brooks. He just kind of stuck an S on the end of Brook, and that's where it is. That's where it came from. He was the youngest of 4 children. His father died when he was 2, so he was basically raised by his mother, 3 brothers, aunts, uncles, and grandmothers. So, there is something to be said for having extended family around in childhood. Like, good things can come of that, and there's been a lot of debate. I think I recently was listening to Michael Malice? I think it was Michael Malice, who was talking about the benefits of having the extended family, not just that core nuclear family. And one of them is when something tragic happens, like the father dies, leaving the mother alone, there are people around to help tremendously. So that worked in his case. Now, he got his, in Mel Brooks' case, probably in Michael Malice's case too, that might be why he mentioned it, I don't know. He got his introduction to show business by befriending actor, writer, and director Don Apple, who introduced him to the Borscht Belt, which is where the wealthy Jewish community spent their summers, aka the Catskills. Oh, heck yeah, that do foam up, don't it? Oh, I think I got exactly the right cup here, because it's not foaming over. He kind of got his start as a comedian, actor, and drummer in the Catskills before the advent of World War II. Obviously, that changed things considerably for a great many people because World War II had to be fought. He is Jewish. So he was 17 in 1944, and he was given the opportunity basically to graduate school early and get some officer training if he passed an aptitude test and joined the Army Specialized Training Reserve Program. All of his brothers were already serving, and his brother Lenny was shot down over Germany while on his 36th mission. Lenny was no dummy. He ripped his dog tags off when he bailed out of the plane, knowing that his dog tags marked him as H for Hebrew, aka Jewish. And the world knew what was going on. Right? They like to pretend they didn't. They totally knew what was going on. Whoops. 1, 2. Okay. You don't want to stir it. You just want to kind of disperse the flavoring, is my understanding. Well, all right. Let's try our soda fountain drink here. When he landed, he was rounded up by the Germans, and the Germans assumed he was Polish, a misconception that he did not correct them on. So the family was very tense for a few weeks until they got word from Red Cross that Lenny had been identified as a prisoner of war in one of the German concentration camps, which is not a cakewalk, but he managed to survive by pretending to be Polish instead of just saying, "Oh yeah, I'm Jewish. Let's just walk me into the chambers like everybody else," because the Germans are assholes. There is a reason that Hitler became a favorite target of Brooks in his future comedies. Not too bad. All right, that sounds pretty tasty. I could see where it might be better if you had like the full effect of the soda fountain, because he says like you pour the chocolate in, then the milk, then you squirt it up, and that mixes it as it goes. So I could see where that might be very cool. I'm going to use the straw to keep mixing. Brooks completed all of his training with the reserve program and then was trained in field artillery. And then he was actually in France. They decided to make him a combat engineer instead. I mean, he does tell a wonderful story about the farmhouse where he was stationed in France and the family that he befriended, and returning there years later while filming Elephant Man with his production studio Brooks Film. And the little boy who had been his buddy was now an adult, and there was like a joyous reunion. It like made me tear up. I was like, oh my God, that's so awesome. And he ends his chapter with kind of a poignant perspective. He says, quote, "The Army didn't rob me of my youth, but actually come to think of it, they really gave me quite an education. If you don't get killed in the Army, you can learn a lot. You learn how to stand on your own 2 feet." And that's important. There's a lot of people who lose that perspective. And I had somebody ask me recently, why would somebody who, doesn't need to, why would they join the Army? Like if they're not planning on going to college, what would be the benefit of joining the Army? And I said, well, you learn who you are when you're in the military, because nobody there knows you. You go in essentially a blank slate, and you can reinvent yourself to be whoever you want to be in the military. All of your family and friends who have preconceived notions of you aren't there to back up those preconceived notions, so you can actually choose to be a better person when you distance yourself in that fashion. I'm basically just sucking up chocolate sauce now. It's very good, though. Now, after the war, he had to figure out what to do with his life, and he did a brief stint as a production assistant for Benjamin Kutcher Productions, and Benjamin Kutcher would later inspire his character Max Bialystock, and ultimately his first movie, The Producers. But that's a few years in the future at this point. While working for Benjamin Kutcher Productions, he reconnected with Don Apple, who introduced him to Sid Caesar. And Brooks would spend a decade writing for Sid Caesar on Your Show of Shows, and then later Caesar's Hour. After that, he joined Carl Reiner to create The 2,000-Year-Old Man, which is wickedly funny. If you've never heard it, there's clips on YouTube. You can go and find them. They're wickedly funny. And he basically just, Reiner will ask him questions, and he'll riff like he's been there since Jesus was a baby and was there and watched it all. Now, during all of this time, he was married, although other than mentioning that his first marriage ended in divorce after 3 children, he doesn't really mention it. Like, I wasn't even aware that he'd had a prior marriage, except until he mentioned, well, during my marriage, my first wife fell apart, and we had 3 kids together, and I love them, they're wonderful. And he does mention his 3 children, but he doesn't mention his former spouse. He does mention meeting and marrying Anne Bancroft, who was undoubtedly the love of his life. While he met and loved her pretty much instantly, he met her after Sid Caesar's shows had both ended, and he was basically unemployed. So he knew he couldn't marry her until he could offer her something. Fortunately, something came along when he became lead writer on a show he created, Get Smart, which lasted, I think he said 4 seasons, though it may have been 5. And when that ended, he made the leap to movies with The Producers. Now, from here, he talks extensively about his movie career, which is fair, right? This is what he is best known for. So it does start with The Producers. That was the first movie that he wrote and directed. Next, he made 12 Chairs, which was based on a book by the same title written by Ilya Ilf and Yevgeny Petrov. It's about a very wealthy Russian lady who, when she dies, she tells her son-in-law and her priest that she sewed her family jewels into one of the 12 chairs that were part of their dining room set before the Russian Revolution. And then these two, like, the mad race is on to find this chair with all these jewels in it. All of the movies he makes are hilarious. All the ones that he directs, produces, directs, acts in are hilarious. He created the Brooks films to have an outlet where he could support other things, but he didn't put his name on any of the Brooks films stuff other than the production company, because he knew that people by that point in time were expecting a comedy, and he didn't want people walking into, like, The Elephant Man, for example, was set in the 19th century, and it's about the Elephant Man who had to, based loosely on a true story, who had to basically make his way as one of the freaks in the circus, if you will, and how the world treated him back then. The movies that he directs in are all hilarious, and I love reading the anecdotes behind how they got made and the behind the scenes stuff. That the book was worth it just for that. The first true satire he made was Blazing Saddles, and this is arguably his most famous movie, and famously pokes fun at the most beloved of American genres, the Western. He actually approached John Wayne to play the part of Waco Kid, and while Wayne read the script, and he declined. I mean, he said he loved it, he thought it was hilarious, but his fans wouldn't appreciate the dirty, raunchy humor portrayed therein. And he's probably right. I mean, John Wayne knew his fans, and he knew what would fly and what wasn't. And while he himself appreciated the humor behind it, it was kind of like Mel Brooks not putting his name on the movies produced by Brooks Films, right? He knows what his fans want and what they're expecting, and he doesn't want to ruin that for them. Next, he satirized classic Hollywood horror with Young Frankenstein, which was brought to him by Gene Wilder. Yeah, Gene Wilder was actually writing it while filming Blazing Saddles. So the two of them wrote that script together, and of course it remains a perennial favorite. Next, he revisited Hollywood's origins with Silent Movie, which is literally a silent movie. And it's hilarious because the only sound made in the entire movie is made by the famous mime Marcel Marceau, right? And he actually says the word no, while everybody else is dead silent in the movie. And then while casting him out for his next idea, he realized that there was a Hollywood legend that was its very own genre, Alfred Hitchcock. And so we come full circle this month. He actually reached out to Hitchcock to tell him, hey, I would like to do this. I would like to satirize your movies. I would like to do XYZ, who was tickled by the idea of high anxiety and worked with Brooks on the script. I mean, what an absolute legend, right? Didn't take himself so seriously that he couldn't appreciate the humor. Apparently during the screening, Hitchcock didn't make a sound, like didn't laugh, didn't giggle, nothing, which made Brooks very nervous about the reception of the finished product. But after the movie released, Hitchcock sent him a case of Chateau Haut-Brion 1961, which pretty sure I could definitely not afford. I'm not much of a wine drinker, so I didn't Google it, but that sounds like something that would be well outside of my price range. Hence the cream egg this week. And he also included a letter that said, "My dear Mel, what a splendid entertainment, one that should give you no anxieties of any kind. I thank you humbly for your dedication, and I offer you further thanks on behalf of the Golden Gate Bridge," which, if you've seen the movie, you'll understand. "With kindest regards, and again, my warmest congratulations, Hitch." Which, if you remember from the book a few weeks ago, he liked his friends to call him Hitch. So what a wonderful acknowledgement of the movie from the guy who inspired it all. I thought that was great. So did Mel Brooks. Now, after High Anxiety, he had created Brooks Films to produce films, but he was always careful to keep his name off those films. Like I said, he wanted to be known for being funny. He is, right? That's always been his milieu and his genre was the humor. But he also knew that there were many amazing stories out there that needed a production company to back them, and that might not get made if he didn't step up and help the aspiring artist, which is what's really inspirational about Mel Brooks, because he doesn't just, he supports what he wants to see in the world, which is something we should all do more of. So he created Brooks Films to do just that. And Brooks Films famously made The Elephant Man, Fatso, Francis, My Favorite Year, The Fly, Solar Babies, 84, Charing Cross Road. I'm sure there's others, but those are the ones he named in the book. Now, having satirized Broadway, Russian literature, Westerns, horror, silent films, Alfred Hitchcock, Brooks decided the next great satire would be world history, which is how we got History of the World Part 1, which is another perennial favorite. And he brought back like all the people. The caveman who was the first artist, was Sid Caesar. Of course, he had Dom DeLuise in there, Madeline Kahn. Gregory Hines famously made one of his first movies there. Just wonderful. And then he found a script that would let him and Anne Bancroft film together in leading roles in To Be or Not to Be. It's still a comedy, and again, mocking Hitler and the takeover of Poland. Like I said, Hitler's a favorite target. Fair enough. The man deserves to be laughed and mocked for all time for everything he did. It was pretty damn good. I might have another. And after that, he looked around for something else to satirize, because the world is full of things that should be satirized. It's what South Park is known for now. And he hit on space operas, which were very big after the success of Star Wars. And like with Hitchcock, he reached out to George Lucas for his blessing, which Lucas gave, but warned that any figures would be impossible to sell due to the characters' resemblance to Star Wars characters, which is why Spaceballs has the big scene where it's yogurt with merchandising.
Merchandising, where the real money from the movie is made.
There's also a legend floating around the interwebs. I don't know if this is true or not. It's not in the book, but it could be true. It certainly seems true that Lucas said, just don't have, don't copy Han Solo, and so he put Lone Star in Indiana Jones attire. I have no idea if that's true. That's not in the book, but it makes a great anecdote. His next film satirizes the rich while utterly humanizing the homeless. When did that come out? 1991. So, George H.W. Bush was president. We had the stock market crash in 89, and so things were looking kind of bleak. And so he decided to satirize the rich. The homeless population was skyrocketing in L.A., which, man, has nothing on the homeless population in L.A. today. And I think Life Stinks is probably one of his least well-known, but it was an excellent addition to Brooks's catalog. And it ends with a genuinely uplifting message. I think the final line is something like, thank you, God, and I'm sorry for not believing in you when I was rich," which is a beautiful way to think about it. And it's true. People never consider any sort of divinity when they're at the top. Well, okay, I shouldn't say that. There are some who do, certainly. But, man, people at the bottom, they sure pray a lot because they got nothing to lose, right? And everything to gain by that faith. And faith is something that pulls people out of a lot of really rough spots. So that was a nice way to end the film. His last two movies he made are Robin Hood Men in Tights, which is obviously a satirization of the Robin Hood story, which rips pretty heavily on Prince of Thieves and is my favorite Robin Hood story. Men in Tights, not Prince of Thieves. That one was okay. Kevin Costner is hit or miss for me as an actor, but yeah, Men in Tights, perfect. And I believe the last movie he made was Dracula, Dead and Loving It, starring Leslie Nielsen. Having lampooned Frankenstein legend, it was kind of only fair that he had to do something with Dracula. And that one came out after the Bram Stoker's Dracula with Gary Oldman and Winona Ryder and Keanu Reeves. So it was a good nod to that and to the Dracula legend. My phone is blinking at me. Now, after all of this, he was, I don't want to say semi-retired, but he kind of taken a step back and a break, and he was approached to turn the producers into a Broadway musical, which he did. And that musical was later put on film and became the first movie I saw with my now husband. And to me, it's even funnier than the original. I know some people that's going to be an absolute sin, but the musical just has a special place in my heart, maybe because it's the first movie I saw with my husband. When the producers released on Broadway in 2001, he became one of only 8 people to ever have won, at least at that point in time. I don't know if there have been more in the intervening 3 years, but as of 2001, there were only 8 people to have ever won an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Tony Award. And the producers would go on to win 12 Tonys, which I believe holds the record to this day. Hamilton is the next closest with 11, so the producers has it beat by 1. Now, Anne Bancroft sadly died of cancer on June 6, 2005. And of course that devastated him. She was the love of his life. But he still has his 4 children, 3 with the first wife and then his son Max Brooks, who he had with Anne. Max, his name might be known to people. He's the author of the Zombie Survival Guide, which I have with my survival books, Where It Belongs, and World War Z, which is the absolute best zombie book I have ever read. The movie I kind of detested. I mean, he mentions the movie because, of course, it starred Brad Pitt in it, but it was a terrible adaptation. The World War Z should have been done as a mini-series, like an interview with flashbacks to everything for the action. That would have been fucking amazing. But no, they had to turn into the crappy little movie, and I'm not going to go into that because that's not what this book is about. Max Brooks has also recently written De-Evolution, I guess it's Devolution, a first-hand account of the Rainier Sasquatch Massacre, which I have not read yet. I'm just trying to figure out where I'm going to put it on my schedule. In 2009, Brooks was honored as a recipient of the Kennedy Center Honors, which recognizes individuals who have made a significant and lasting contribution to American culture. In 2013, he received the American Film Institute Lifetime Life Achievement Award, and in 2015, he received the National Medal of Arts. Mel Brooks has managed to do something that very few humans have actually managed. I mean, he has lived, and he has shared his joy in life through the medium of film and his wonderful sense of humor. While reading this book, I realized that I have actually seen every movie of his. I haven't seen all of the Brooks Films productions, but I've seen everything that he has directed. I've seen both versions of The Producers, 12 Chairs, Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein, all of them. So that has shaped my life in remarkable ways. I'm sure my sense of humor is much darker as a result of it. I see the comedy in everything around me, and I think that I can thank Mel Brooks for that. So that's wonderful. This book was filled with wonderful anecdotes and remembrances of a life lived in full, and it's not quite done yet because he's 98. Yeah, he just passed his 98th birthday. I loved reading it. I highly recommend it. And that's it for this week. If you liked what you saw, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys next Sunday. Bye.